It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Jeff Friedman. We're in your beautiful studio, your clinic as well, here in Baka in Jerusalem. And Jeff, you have the most amazing story about your parents and how you've dealt with being a second-generation Holocaust survivor. So if you could give us a background where your parents came from and...
Sure, yes. I must say that I always had a bit of a resistance to the term second generation, but I'm okay with it now at my age. I'm not sure why. I think it always implied the sadness of the Holocaust, of the trauma. I didn't want to only bear that identity, because coming from this kind of family of who survived the Holocaust, there were a lot of strengths that were also inherited, not just the trauma. And there was certainly a families that they came from prior to the Holocaust, which I tried to very much connect with. So I would say I never even heard of the Holocaust until after high school, back in the 70s. Nevertheless, both my parents came from what was then Czechoslovakia, in the Carpathian Mountains, from Hasidic families, and I grew up in Brooklyn, and my father would wake me up every morning. I mentioned this a number of times, but the first non-verbal discussion of the Holocaust was not even a discussion, but it was non-verbal in the sense that my father had used to wake me up with his tefillin in a little room I had, and apparently he put up on the corner of the room a photograph of this little girl here. I guess I'm going right into the story.
That's true.
Here you go.
And this was in your room?
This was in my room, and he would approach it every morning after he finished his prayers, and he would have a ritual. This photograph was in a larger frame that had the independence of Israel, the Declaration of Independence of Israel. It was written out. There was a Rav Kook on one end, and this little girl on a sled.
I'm just going to zoom in.
You want me to hold it? Yeah. And he would have a ritual. He would go over to this picture every morning and give her a kiss. And I would be watching this, and you would think naturally I would ask who this girl was, but there was this unspoken message, this ambiance, not to ask, that it was from another time and another place, and that he didn't want to talk about it. But he didn't have me observe this ritual that he did.
But can I ask you, this was your room, and most youngsters, teenagers, they like putting up their own pictures on the wall.
Well,
and you didn't mind having this picture on your wall?
You know, it's a good question you're asking, because I didn't. I grew up with European parents from Hasidic families, and there was not the value of letting the. I guess later on I had my own posters, but at that age, I guess they decided what to put up in my room.
And you never asked who this little girl was?
And I never asked. Never asked. It was from the other world. No one gave me a sense that they. It's hard to believe, but they weren't. It was very much a part of. I was not part of it. It was something I observed. I think it reflected his own ambivalence, or his own desire to say something to somebody, his son, who was born after the war. And he had this other family before the war. Anyway, it turned out, of course, it was his daughter. He died when I was 15, and I discovered photographs of another family. And I asked my mother, this will respond to your question. I asked my mother, who also was a survivor from the same town, who they were, and her response was, "I can't tell you."
So he didn't speak to your mum?
So she knew, but what I later found out was that they couldn't speak very much to themselves about this. My mother said it was too painful. I later found out that there was a whole culture of it being kind of embarrassing for her, perhaps. Or maybe many people had tragedies. There was a culture at that time that wasn't so psychologically minded in the 60s, 70s. I was born in the 50s even. It wasn't.
Did your mother did she have a previous marriage before she?
No, my mother didn't. My mother was not married. They were about 13 years apart. After, what I found out later was my father had witnesses that his family were taken to the to the gas chambers. He had the date, and he had the particular transport, and they were killed in the gas chambers.
Do you know which camp they were sent to?
They were, I believe, Auschwitz. They were burnt in. They were gassed in Auschwitz, and when he found that out, this was 1945. He knew my mother's family. They were very distantly actually related, but he knew them and really loved my grandfather. This is a photo of my grandfather at different stages of his life. Yaakov Schreier was his name. Yaakov Schreier. Later on, I took Yaakov. I'll get to it, but you'll see this. I guess this documentary or documenting whatever. My intents were here to actually connect to the worlds that were part of their lives that were so cut off. So I had inherited these photographs, and when I started having kids, I started to connect to my father, who had passed away many years back, and searched out photographs, and said, I'm going to have the wonderful thing in the arts. You could be an alchemist. You could take a painting of an old my Hebrew name is Chaim Yaakov Leib. I have one of my names connected to his. I knew him from stories later on from my uncle David.
If you could.
Yeah, I have an uncle. My uncle David. He passed away a few years back. Very young, handsome picture of him. My mother's brother, and they. I heard great stories about their family and about Yaakov. And
was your uncle also a survivor?
This was my uncle, also a survivor.
Did he speak about his experiences?
Well, in the 90s, we went to Czechoslovakia. I went with him, with a few cousins, to visit their house, because there was such a great story. My mother would not go, because my mother was arrested. After the war, she went back to her house, because she hid photographs and some things, and the neighbors were living there, and they called the police on her, and she was arrested, and she was very, very disturbed by the rejection.
Is that a picture of the?
Oh, so yeah, this was actually their house, and this one. Yeah, this house, and I went there. I actually saw the house. It's hard to see, but my mother is actually out of the window. What was really interesting was they had a neighbor across the street who was the Shabbos guy, who would like to, and we met him. It's one of these amazing stories that my uncle would talk, and he remembered, and it was a very, very beautiful town.
It must have been very emotional going back to the town.
I'm sorry?
It must have been extremely emotional going back.
It was beautiful for me. First of all, to see that town. It was a very magical town. The Baal Shem Tov went in the forests. Forests very rich with all kinds of wonderful smells. Chamomile, I remember. There were hot springs. It was a healing town. They had their own little Rebbe there, Polian Rebbe.
And Jeff, this is a postcard of the.
Oh yeah, this is
quite amazing.
A postcard that I still have to get translated. These were like little ends, bits.
And on the other side of the postcard is a picture of the.
Yeah, this is blown up.
Can I ask, when you went back to the house?
Yeah.
With your uncle,
Yeah.
did you go inside the house?
Yeah, we did, but they were very nervous because we had a translator. They were scared we were going to
Reclaim
it. I think we had to say something, and
But they allowed you to go in.
not us to go in. My uncle, my mother used to speak when they spoke about their childhood in this house. It had like it was idyllic. It was like out of a legend. And we went there. It was a little house, but it was very and it had a beautiful apple tree, and there were some stories around the way they spoke about him that retained a kind of magic, or a magical house, that they were, they were uprooted, and there was no time to really process separation and leaving the trauma of being uprooted. And I see my father's rituals till I was 14 years old, and he would come and kiss his daughter. I see that like he didn't have a chance to part with a child of his.
When you came back after that visit,
Yeah.
was your mum very interested in finding out how the house was?
She had very bad memories. She just had very bad memories of going back to it after the war. And she asked my uncle, of course, but she was, she carried with her wounds from there.
And how did she feel about you going back?
I think that she was ambivalent. She didn't say no, and but she it wasn't so profoundly important for her. For my uncle, it was, and my uncle told me amazing stories. This uncle, at 16, he studied at a yeshiva in a town not far in Silish, it's called, and at the Spinker Rebbe, and he used to tell me with such pride that one of the most important things in his life was that he was chosen by the Spinker Rebbe to be the Gabbai.
Wow.
So you hear a story like that, you say, what's the? I mean, it must be very it's an honor. But only when I went on this trip with him did I understand something about what the Spinker Rabbi saw in him. And I'll tell you what the story was. My uncle, it was the first time I shared a hotel room with him. And it was kind of funny, he would take out his dentures at night. He had dentures. Your dentist, suddenly his mouth totally transformed into another person. And he told me a story that stayed with me. And the story, I'll say very quickly, was, well, not so quickly.
No, there's no time.
There's no, yeah.
This is.
I know my uncle was a funny man. He was very comical. He made funny faces always, and the serious part that he had in him, the heavier parts, he kind of hid. He was very religious in his feeling. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. He told me that he was I think it was also in bunkers, either in a slave camp or concentration camp. I don't remember exactly. I think it was this work camp, and they very bad, terrible conditions. They were starving, and they had little bread, 1 piece per day, and they shared these wooden cuts to sleep on, wooden bunkers, like in concentration camps. You see those. His partner, his person he shared with it, they called him for a work detail suddenly at night. And he took out from his pocket, he said, "David, please watch this for me. Till the morning, I'll come back." And my uncle described levels of hunger and struggles with himself not to eat the bread, the terrible famished sensation. He wanted to eat that bread. He fought with himself, and he told me it came morning, and he told me this with tears. I never saw him cry. He said, in the morning he gave back the whole piece of bread. Then I understood why the Spinker Rebbe chose him at 16 to be the Gabbai. That's how I understood all those two events were very impacting on him, and I didn't know about. And that was a gift of sharing the room with him, of these profound stories of of situations that we're very fortunate not to have experienced, and but gave me kind of an insight into my uncle. In any event, just going back in time, I was always interested in my father. Was a beautiful Bal Tefillah. My dad, my father. Also, I'll show a picture, and I'll tell you a little bit of my father. All right, so this is another painting I did of my father. And I based it on, I guess, some of the photographs. I found photographs, and over my life, I should say this, I got trained in social work, in psychology, and then in the expressive arts. And when I started having kids, I connected back to my father, and as a child and as an adult, and I decided I wanted to do a testimony with the materials that I was engaged in with coming from my family. And he, despite the fact that he didn't verbalize and didn't share with me stories, he sang. And in his singing, there was so much feeling in his singing that it was just beautiful, and it was very soulful and emotional. And he processed a lot of his feelings through that medium. And it connected me to something very old. I could feel something. In any event,
Jeff, can you put the picture together? It's an
this
amazing.
Is my father and him?
It's
chose
it's very special what you did here.
Well, what I really wanted to do was I wanted to connect myself to his other family, because these were sisters. So I did an imaginary dialogue, and this is kind of interesting. So this is the photograph, as I pointed out earlier, that he used to kiss. 10 or 15 years later, my mother kind of came around and she said, "Oh, there's another photograph." Much like this. Here's the name of the, I can't even read it, the photograph. Very brittle photograph. I made some copies, and I made this empty void, and I put them together. And I looked at it and I said, "Dad," I started to have an imaginary dialogue with him, with both of them. Also with her I did some things. And I spent some time, I was working in Malay Adumim, and I found a person in theater, and I said, "I'm going to write a play about this, an imaginary, because I felt a need to complete unfinished stories, lashlim, left with, and questioning, like, why didn't he tell me names? In Israel, there's it used to be, I don't know if it's still around, a radio program called Chipus, Arutz Lechipus Krovei Mishpacha, searching for family members, whether it's Holocaust or other people. They were searching for names, and I was on the program twice, described my father's place of where he lived when he was first married, and if anyone knew the names of these kids.
And your father never told you the names?
No, he died.
And did your mother know the names?
No.
But you have the pictures, actually.
I have the pictures, and I tried to actually glue one of the, and it didn't take. It didn't stay on, and I said, that it was a reality. He did not want to share with me at that age. I was not to be part. It was something I was not to be part of, and yet I wanted to be part of, connected to. And then I started to imagine, why wouldn't he want me to be part and know about his, I could have said Kaddish, I could have honored a name. Why would he cut off like that? And of course, And I started to think about it as a father. I imagined him saying, "Well, what do you want me to fall apart from the grief and the guilt and or whatever emotions he must have had in relation to the loss of kids that weren't that he was not able even to bury." There's something in the Jewish burial. You bury, whether it's your kids or someone. And I said, he's had me watch this ritual every day. I said, maybe I'm a kind of a chevra kadisha. Maybe I'm going to continue. I'm going to take this as a metaphor of a burial.
Maybe he didn't want to cause a trauma.
Yes, for sure. I'm certain of it.
As a youngster, you'd be traumatized.
I think you're right. I think later on, maybe he would have. Whatever it was, I said, I'm accepting. I'm already older. I was already over. I did in my adulthood. I had kids. I could handle more.
Can I ask you? Do you remember some of the nigunim that he used to sing?
I do. I remember.
Could you?
La la la, ya 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 ya, la 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 la, la la la. Oh yeah. That was one of the nigunim. Anyway, I was starting to search for more photographs. I said, I like these photographs. I want to do some more work. I want to express some of their feelings, my own feelings. I found bunches of photos that I had, but there were more. So this was a Rembrandt photo of how Yaakov and his deathbed blessed his children. And I really found it very beautiful. Like it was a real cycle, a life cycle. He completed a life cycle. He died well. And I said they didn't have that privilege to mourn their losses, grieve them, bury them. So, and I liked the blessing. So I said I'm going to have my grandfather. When I said, bless my first son here, Yaniv, and I painted Yaakov Schreier, my grandfather, giving my son, and I kind of created a continuity for myself with this.
It's absolutely magnificent.
Thank you. I found the frame 2 years earlier at sometimes I look for items that are interesting and I don't know how I'm gonna use it, but I save it. So I found this great frame here in Yerushalayim, and it's a nice story that that he's kind of with my son in Jerusalem, and So I did another thing. I found another photograph of a. This is not my grandfather, but I like this relationship. This is a Holocaust of a picture of a grandfather with a grandson, and we didn't grow up with grandparents, my generation, and you lack a sense of continuity in time, linear time. It's kind of cut off. And I had a kind of, at the time, wanted to connect very much to make this kind of continuity and connection. I did some paintings. I don't have it right now, but I'm the subject of connecting to the older generations. Because my parents' generation, it almost felt like they were Bereshit. There was nothing before them. It was very strange. I don't know,
and just the picture that you have.
Oh yeah, so that's, these were attempts at connecting to sisters. So I did a pastel of painting this person, and I'm really not sure if it's another sister. He had 3 children, I found out, and he had a picture of I found his wife that my mother couldn't tell me about, but I guess it's not here right now. So I tried. These are really attempts at trying to connect to no names. And I accepted they don't have names. They're my half-sisters. I don't know their names. He didn't share with me their names. Klal Yisrael, and it's a kind of many stories of many children, of many families that are left without names. And
can I ask, do you have an idea how these pictures survived?
Such a good question. I know some of my mother's pictures. This is one of my mom and her sister Clara. I mean, I was born much later than that. They were together. Amazing stories. She later told me a lot of stories. She was in 1944. They were taken to Auschwitz, where they lived. From 1939, the Hungarian Nazis took over their area. My mother was a seamstress, a dressmaker, and one of the stories I'll quickly say, which is, I grew up with the story of to survive, she would sew, but it was done clandestinely because they would have been arrested. They weren't allowed to work, and some of the men were taken away. She got. They were Jewish midgets who were circus people in the town. It's like a Shalom Aleichem story. And she would tell me, I grew up. She'd tell me this story of this family of midgets, circus people. They got a special ishur.
That's and permission.
Permission to perform, and they needed clothing. So they would go to my mom. And in order to perform, they had to inform. They were Jewish. The Hungarian Nazis, of course, they informed my mother. This is about 30 years ago. I'm living here about 40 years. 30 years ago, I was reading a story in the Jerusalem Post about a family of circus performers in Haifa. Who were midgets and dwarfs, and it was their family, and they came from that area. Because I never met them, and I didn't, but it was the same story, same people that were in the story that I grew up with from my mom. I grew up with a few songs from her as well, like gypsy songs. The gypsies played music. They played wedding music at weddings, and so I knew a few.
Can you do some of the tunes?
My Hungarian people would laugh at it.
No, it's funny.
Goes on and on, but I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but
it's very, very moving.
Yeah.
And did your mom speak about her experiences in the camps?
My mom spoke a number of stories, her experiences. She was on the death march. She hid in a farm with 5 other women under hay, bales of hay, and they moved on, and they stayed in this town, and they were they found the town was kind of abandoned for the most part, I guess. They took over a chocolate shop. She made out of the villanot, the draperies, clothing for them, because they were wearing concentration camp clothing, and they lived there for like 2 weeks until the Gestapo got word. And then they were taken into the forest, and they were going to be killed. And my aunt, Clara, said she believed that it was Eliyahu Hanavi. She said some German soldier came to the Nazis. They were going to shoot them, and said that the Russians were about to come, and he convinced them to let them go because they'll be, charged with murder if they. So they let them go, and my mom had some harrowing stories. Just many stories.
Which camp was she taken to?
She was in Auschwitz. She was in Auschwitz. She was in the Mangala selection. She was taking her half sister. This was Esther. Was there? Esther had a couple of children, and she was killed. She looked a lot like Clara. These were three sisters. Esther was a little older. There was Fischel, who was much older, who was killed in a work transport. They killed 1 out of 10 people. Somebody tried to escape, and he was the 10th. He lost his life. And a bunch of other cousins and families and parents and nephews. But so they were taken to. They were in a ghetto beforehand. It was Pesach, 1944. They were taken to a ghetto.
Do you know the name of the ghetto?
I have it written down.
But it's part of the Czech today. The Czech.
Well, I'm sorry.
In the Czech.
Now, okay. So they were brought up in Czechoslovakia, but Czechoslovakia.
It changed.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. There was the Austro-Hungary Empire, and then Czechoslovakia, and then the Brits and Germany had the Anschluss, and the Germany got, and it went back to the Hungarian Nazis, part of where they were from. And anyway, they were from a place called Kobylice Polyana. I think that's a Hungarian name. And I'm not sure where I'm up to. I guess my attempt here was really, I can never understand the chronology of events for my mother. It took me a long time until I studied.
Did she have a number?
She didn't have a number. I don't know why they didn't have.
And your father?
My aunt, I had an aunt that had it. My father was not in concentration because he was in slave labor camps, Hungarian slave labor camps.
But your mother's aunt had one.
I had an aunt that had one. I don't know why she didn't have. She didn't have one.
And your parents, did they? Were a lot of their friends also survivors?
Yes, yeah. A lot of their, all of my close relatives were. I mean, my mom actually was kind of lucky out of a lot of family, but she had 2 brothers and a sister that survived. My father, out of 9 siblings, 1 survived, and a half sibling in Israel, and then not his kids, but they were going to come to Israel in '49, and then my mother had a half brother that lived in America, and they sent them a visa, so they decided to go to the States in 1949. And I have a sister who was born in 1952, and then I was in 1955, and and then it was just a very strong sense of like this other world there, and this world that was almost tangible but not present. And
Jeff, you did, I think, behind you is the most magnificent.
Wow, so this is.
It's a painting.
Yeah, this is more imaginary. Oh, so this is related to I was searching for photos. So I wanted to give significance, meaning, and form to the spectrum of emotions and thoughts that I felt in relation to my family and the experience. And I just had a limited amount of photographs, so I went to Yad Vashem and I tried to find photographs that spoke to me, that I could connect with. And I found a really interesting one, but this is a painting. And I'll tell you the story of this. I found a photograph of 4 people. This is already, I did the painting of it. This is this is already a painting. It's very large. I think I have it elsewhere stored. And this figure spoke to me. Her gaze had meaning to me. And I imagined her saying, take me out. I felt I needed to focus on her. She wanted me to focus, if you see. So I did a separate painting of her. And she became a kind of an important figure to me. Like Jungian terms, they would call it an anima, maybe a feminine representation of something. But I connected to my mom, and I connected to kind of witnessing, deep witnessing of life, and beyond all the tragedies, almost meta experience, after the grief, after everything, kind of almost a planetary figure, or a cosmic figure. And then I took something out of the liturgy. It says, Ma Adam v'teda'ehu ben enosh v'tichashvehu. It's a prayer that's said on the Yom Kippur. For me, it was like...
Could you translate for us?
Yeah, well, I would say, Ma Adam v'teda'ehu. What is man that one could know him? Ben enosh, the son of humanity, and that one could fathom him. So for me, it was more like something is so unfathomable. Like after the anger and the grief and the mourning and whatever you're just left with something unfathomable. That this experience is unfathomable.
I think you've depicted it.
That's her meaning to me.
It's incredible.
She's one of the more important meanings out of all. I mean, these were very personal. I mean, this was kind of cosmic meaning. This has a kind of another entity.
There's a sadness and there's a despair, but there's also a bit of a hope. There's a There's a contrast to the black and the white.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to paint her at a benign. You see the light comes out differently? So it's like I wanted her to be in between states, not day, not night, the moon, something.
That's remarkable.
She's a figure that, manifests in the shadows. And I appreciate her.
No, it's really it's very significant. It's very profound. Very profound.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is she's very meaningful to me. But I can't have it up in my house so much because they are depressing. Some of these are depressing. I have thank God 5 kids and my wife, but they don't come from that background so much at all. My wife's family actually on the father's side comes from Jerusalem. And they don't have this legacy and these kind of connections to things that precede my life, that one's life, everyone has, we're all born into stories that precede our life. But,
can I ask your sister? Was your sister, is she also...
wow, it's such a good question.
Was she also engrossed, or
no,
was she committed to finding the past?
I think okay, so my father passed away when I was 15, and I went to a school, and my best friend, I had a best friend, came from a very unusual family. They were very, very expressive. The father was an off-Broadway actor. I went to his yeshiva days, yeshiva high school. This was more of a bohemian family. This was not, and they were interesting, kind of intellectuals. The mother was a psychologist. The father was, and they were great artists. And I became a Ben Bayit there, and I was amazed that it was an introduction how one could relate to one's inner world, and contact it and do something with it. I kind of learned that you can manifest you're something internal in the outside world, the world of symbolism, the world of creating. And it just engaged me very, very deeply. And it's part of my development, my trajectory, and it shifted me. Because coming from my family, things were denied and were not spoken about.
And here in this family, you could express yourself.
In his
openly.
family, they kind of read feelings. They had a background. They talked to. So my sister, I think she didn't have that kind of shifting experience. So I don't know how much she shared the deep interest. I think it was hard. I think it was engaging this material in order to engage with it. It evokes, like you said, sadness. It evokes, I maybe have processed some things, and the way I'm speaking, I'm not going into like tragedy or that, but basically it's very, very hard material. And I'm not, so I was kind of different. I became a little bit different in the way we grew up because I incorporated the experience I had with this other family.
Did your sister, out of interest, did she ever ask your father about his previous life or the previous sisters?
My sister had an interesting experience. She was at his place of work. He had a factory. He manufactured sweaters, and somebody came into his place of work and says, "Is Shalom Friedman here? Sal Friedman." My sister must have been helping out there or working, and he said, "Well, he's." Walked out, or could I take a message? He said, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm his daughter." And the man looked shocked. He said, "His daughter? His daughters were killed." That's how she first.
That's the first time she.
That's what she found out, and then she didn't tell me about this. Only after my father died, and after I had the experience with discovering these photographs. And seeing a woman with 3 children, and my mother telling me I can't speak about it, then I kind of shared that with my sister. But I think my sister was like, my sister understood, like, I grew up, that's shayach, it belongs to there. Terrible, blackness, darkness, evil, grief. What do you want to touch that for?
And maybe you didn't want to upset your parents by discussing it.
Well, my father certainly not. And my mother, I did an exhibition once for Amcha here. Amcha is an organization for Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
I did an exhibition of these artworks, and I explained it. I actually have a little pamphlet that I made, and I sent it also to my sister. Because I was very, very engaged with it. For me, it was very meaningful. I felt I enriched myself from it. Everyone has their own. I'm learning. My father, as I said earlier, I tried to put the picture of his daughter here. It wouldn't stay. He wouldn't let me in. People have their own. We have to respect people's defenses, mechanisms of feeling safe. And it's a bit of a phantom, but it's or fantasy, a phantom, but of trying to engage. These. But I feel it's a kavod. I feel like I'm
tremendous. It's tremendous. The memory. It's an eternal memory that you've done.
Yeah, it's kind of a. But it's not only.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing as well.
Feel it. I wanted to go. I wanted to feel something. I wanted through the feeling, I want to engage with him more.
So can I ask, by doing this painting, and by doing the painting of your Zayda, your grandfather, do you feel that you actually connect, but you've created something and you connect with it?
So I don't want to sound too mystical and too strange about it, but yeah, I definitely. I think I have a good imagination. I think I grew up with so many feelings. There was a world of many, many feelings there, and I felt able to access and maybe to translate it into something more conscious, more aware, feel it. So yeah,
And it became real. You took
materialized. Yeah. Yeah, I felt it was true. I think it was authentic. It was like something really inside, and you know, I could go on with it. It's really a source for me. It's
so I just want to ask you. You showed me this unbelievable. It's a ketubah of your parents from. They were married in Prague.
Oh, so my parents were married in 1945 after my father got witnesses of his family, his wife and kids being gassed. And then they went to this, it's called the Altneu Shul in Prague. And I guess at the time, this was in 1945, and it was a handwritten ketubah. I don't know who, there were no rabbis there. His cousin married him. I think Leiby, who lived in Haifa. You mentioned Haifa earlier. Yeah, and here's the official stamp of, and it says here, Prague, and the date here, and the month.
Is it legible?
11th. They were married on 4/11/1945. Because they had their anniversary not long ago.
See, it's priceless what you have here.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jeff, can I ask your parents, because it must have been very hard for your father, having lost his wife and his children, to start a new life, and to get remarried.
I think he was an amazing man.
And they had a happy. They were happy.
They had a good marriage. They had a nice marriage, whatever that means. You know, yeah, I think they had. They couldn't share or talk about a tragedy that happened to them. So, you know, that's a whole subject.
It's hard to comprehend.
It's hard to comprehend. So, you know, when you're talking about, like, okay, what is intimacy? What's a family? What can you share? There was feeling. My mother used to bring out dozens of, like, nerot nishama, candles on the holidays, and it was a feeling. But they recreated a feeling of. There was a lot of robustness. There was a lot of life. He was really a loved person. My father, very able. Somebody took him into a business to be with him. He did well. You know, we were middle class, but he went to. We used to walk pretty far to one of the shuls that he walked to. Friday nights we would go to there was a hospital where we lived, called the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital in my neighborhood, where I got introduced to the world of chronic illness. It was really heartbreaking. You see a lot of kids, different ages and adults, and we would feed them. And then on Shabbat we'd walk to Brownsville, a little farther down, and my father had his shul there. They would eat kiddush, they would drink and have, you know, arbus and herring and all these kinds of things, and sing and recreate kind of a nice feeling. Amazing. I think to come after what he experienced and start a new life, bring new life into the world. Amazing. But he used to tell me when I was a kid, he used to sit me on his lap, and I think I needed a lot more attention though from him. When I think back, I wanted him to know. And he was very absorbed in his singing and whatever. It's okay, I learned it. But he used to tell me that he wanted me to remember a number of his songs, because he's not going to be here forever. And he actually died not that much longer. When, you know, I was 7, he died at 15. But maybe there was a sense. So he. Yeah. So
is there any other nigunim?
So I think it was pretty amazing that they started and had the koach and the strength and.
Jeff, did you remember any other nigunim?
Oh yeah, I got a bunch
so if
of.
You could.
Oh boy!
You did so beautifully.
I'm not wearing my yarmulke. Okay. It was good. That's okay. That's all right. Used to go.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I have a something here. That's all right.
It's fine.
I don't mind. I'll do a little bit. Okay, we do Kol Mekadesh Shvi Karaoi Lo Kol Shomer Shabbos Kodesh Kadosh Mechalelo Sicharo Armoniot Al Pi Pialo Ish Al Machanehu V'ish Al Digalo.
It's very good.
And you go deeper into it. I'm doing on one level, one otzma, really deep. I was fortunate to be in a film a number of years back from an Italian. I'll give you the disc. Filmmaker, I forgot his name, but it was really cinematic documentary of second generation people who engaged with the stories and tried to find their own voice, their own things to say, and they asked me to sing some of these songs, so it was very, very nice. And for me, it's like giving edut. This is an opportunity. I'm not cutting off.
It's like witness. I'm
not cutting. Yes, and I'm not colluding in silence about it, or the keeping it. My father, he had kids. It was a life. I'm an extension of him. I'm not only the story of the Holocaust. It's also a subject because it's a very, very overwhelming story, and an overwhelming cloud to be growing up with. And there was also simcha. I had,
In your home,
yeah,
was there a lot of laughter and happiness?
Well, great parents, beautiful, loving people, but it was not so easy. It was a little. It was. I mean, I had what I needed. Sent me to schools. Camps. We had.
But on birthdays, was there celebration?
I don't think we didn't celebrate so much birthdays. I think because from their background, they didn't. My birthday was in the summers, and sometimes we were away. And the truth is this: we were 4 people in my little family, and I don't remember one discussion that we had. But there was love and feeling, but it was functional. But there wasn't. It was singing for my father, not my sister and my mother. But there wasn't. It wasn't addressing memories or life.
Maybe it was
absolutely
too painful. Maybe the trauma was overwhelming.
I totally agree with you, and I don't want to come across as if I'm judging them or I understand it. I could understand it. I accept it, but I took it a step. I took it to my own place. That I think I always wanted to enter it. That world. It was something It's like imagine this imaginary barrier that's there, and you can't see it, and you can't really talk about it, but you could feel it. And I felt drawn to it, but also anger of trying to get too close to it. And I remember being in, and I think that's the experience. I'm not the only one going through this. I think who had this experience. I remember attending once maybe it was the Warsaw Ghetto meeting, or some of these communities met, and they were singing, and I remember feeling that I wasn't allowed to sing with them. So it's like experience something, but that tension was because I felt connected, and my father showed me, and I heard it, and I felt his music, but it was a world that was very preoccupying. So school, and it almost felt the whole world felt very secondary to this other unfinished story. So I think that's why it engaged me. It's a legacy of coming from a very powerful shadow that tried to compartmentalize for good reason.
Yeah.
For good reason. You need to protect yourself. You don't want to have a grief reaction, they call it. You don't want to stay with grief your whole life, but you can't totally, some people go to therapy, you go this, they didn't have that in those days.
In those days it was unheard of.
Yeah, maybe some people did, not my family. And certainly, it's just, it's just the reality and of how things are. I think had I not even gone into this field that I do now work, as I said, I get trained in social work and in therapies and psychotherapy, family therapy, mediation work.
Do you think because of your family background, that's why you gravitated towards psychology?
I think I certainly think that was definitely a very strong motivation. But as I said, this family that I was a Ben Bait, I adopted. The mother was in this field, in social work and psychology. And I think that she was able to articulate things that I didn't even know about and that were inside, and it fascinated me. It very fascinated me. So, yeah, I think that's how I did get. I think it was suited for me. I was thinking. I was thinking of even rabbinic work, but I wasn't sure. I kind of wasn't so I had issues around the orthodoxy and ideology and where I fit. Anyway, but I may be doing good work with the mediation work, and that's sort of, but it's a really. I think it was born into a situation that that needed more. I don't know. I shouldn't say that needed. I think I felt
you had a need.
I felt I had a need for engaging something so profoundly felt, and yeah.
And to be honest, I think everybody would love to know.
Yeah.
Are your kids? Are they keen to continue in your?
Beautiful. I think. I feel very.
But are they interested in the history?
I have some kids here. I could probably bring one out, and you could ask her tomorrow. And Noah and Yaniv and Yael.
Do they want to hear stories of their?
They're very interested. Yeah, they're interested.
So you're transmitting this to the next generation?
I believe that I am whatever I can, but I think that how I use my experience translated for myself and the feelings and emotions, they have their own way of translating it with different words, and they grow up here, and they're not. I don't need them to have an exact copy of me, but I do want them to have a continuity. And they're in Israel. My father would be so thrilled. They wanted to move to Israel in 1969. He was about to retire. They bought a little place in Netanya. He was going to move here. And he died in 71. And I think I moved here because of religious reasons and a kind of completion of having his seeds here, his family here. I wasn't bad in America. I didn't feel a need to run away from America. I liked America. I had a nice experience. America was a great country, but now it's having its challenges. Big challenge moving here that all of us Olim have. You leave family.
Yeah.
You don't realize it until you're many years here. I became an immigrant, like my dad.
And your mom was happy that you...
My mom was kind of happy. She understood. She was good, okay with me. She understood it, and she felt that that it fulfilled some kind of wish of my family and my father, and she felt this. She understood the importance of a Jewish state, and so yeah, she was.
And Jeff, can I ask, from all your life experience, and you really have had a most incredible life experience,
thank you.
and how the challenges and how you dealt with it, and how you've transformed. It's actually quite. It's unbelievable.
I think.
What message would you want to impart to your kids or to the next generation?
Wow. Yeah. I think. I once heard this said, and I liked it, by Jung, Carl Jung. I mentioned him earlier. He was a psychiatrist. Some people say he was a Nazi sympathizer, but which would be a great paradox that I have. But I don't think that they took him. I think it took him out of context. I think he was actually considered an informer for the Nazis to the West. There's a whole subject about him, but I like he's very interesting, some of his ideas, and I connect with it, some of what he says. But he claims that the degree that the parent can materialize whatever their life's purpose is, that's the best gift you give to your kids.
It's a wonderful thing. It's from
looking,
yeah.
What's it in Pirkei Avot? Well, whatever it is, it's how you how you materialize, how you create your life. And so anyway, to answer you in response to your question, I feel I guess appreciation, if I have to. I hope they connect to things that make life worthwhile and meaningful, and everyone and continue a story. One thing I liked about Israel, as opposed to America, is that the Holocaust it stopped. Like Israel for me is a response, and it's a continuity of the Holocaust. It happened, but you put it away. You keep going, moving. I like the idea of movement, and I don't want to just stay here. I'm not doing this work to just stay in the Holocaust. I don't need to stay there. I don't want to just stay there. I want to incorporate the meaning I have and what I was left with in order to transform something in myself and work. But al taseh toratcha keva. Don't make your Torah keva. It's not about fixating. But it's also about, okay, what do you have? What materials do you have? How do you engage with it? How do you move forward? I don't lack my own challenges on a lot of levels. We all have but I'm appreciative and thank you for.
I want to thank you. It's
Do you think that are you off now?
No. Jeff, I just want to, I'm just coming for a second.
Yeah. Please,
I just want to thank you so much, really, from the bottom of my heart. It's been unbelievable to hear your life story and how you've taken your past and how you've actually transformed it into something so positive, and we see what you've done and imparted this knowledge, and it's just, you're such a dugma, such an example we can all try emulate, really.
Thank you.
I'm so extremely grateful.
Thank you so much.
And your kids are very, very blessed to have you as a father, and your parents above are smiling, and they must be very, very happy.
Thank you so much.
It's really remarkable what you've done and how you've really transformed your life, and you've made it so positive. You've taken something which potentially could be so negative, and you've made it so positive.
That's how I feel. I feel whatever happens in this life, we have to l'kadesh to which for me means to make a meaning
and make it holy and make it meaningful.
I'm careful about words, holy, and that. I'm careful about it. I'm not saying it for my own beliefs that are positive. Maybe that's Lakadish.
Well, making it meaningful. He's making it in a way.
It's meaningful. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but you could have like Frankl.
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. He was not an Orthodox religious Jew, but he talked about the meaning.
The meaning of life.
So I'm not sure if he would use the word holy. I have more religious sentiment, but I'm very careful about Anyway,
Can I ask you
think about
a
it.
very big favor?
Yeah, please.
The second nigun that you sang, could
Yeah.
you do it again?
You already told
We were
me.
interrupted. And it
Sure.
was so beautiful.
Okay. I'll continue it from אוהבי השם מחכים בבניין אריאל ביום השבת קודש שישו ושמחו כי מקבלי מתנת ליאל גם שאו ידיכם קודש ואמרו לאל ברוך אדוני אשר נשא מנוחה 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 לעמו ישראל.
You internalized everything that your father told you and shared with you, and thanks for sharing it with us.